God designed us to be learners. However, much of our learning and discipleship today regarding the church, current affairs, and theology has been reduced to pithy sayings and viral tweets. Just Say It seeks to help Christians go deeper on church, theology, scripture, and current issues in our world. I'm Chase Davis.
And I'm Matt Patrick. And join us and other guests for a monthly conversation on the topics that are impacting Christians in the church here in Colorado. You can expect candid conversations on the topics ranging from church attendance during ski season to Spurgeon's view of the atonement.
Welcome back to another episode of Just Say It. Matt and I here again today.
Same outfits.
Same same day, different release. And so on this episode, we're going to talk about a fun topic that we've really been exploring. I mean, our church has always been fairly like, this is our position, not caving on it since the beginning. And it's been one that's got us most flack consistently since we planted, is that we're complementarian, that we believe that pastors are male and that men are leaders in the home. That's the most conservative, narrow version of complementarianism.
Can we answer the question that everybody has burning on their mind first, Chase?
Go ahead.
I want you to answer this.
Okay.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Great.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
How does one spell complementarianism?
COMPLEMEN.
Men.
Remember that?
It's in there.
That was a funny joke.
Putting the men back in complementarianism.
IANISM. Not compliment like, oh, Matt.
Compliment.
Your shirt is so gray today. As a compliment. It's compliment like puzzle pieces.
I love that you think that's a compliment, Chase.
No, it's funny. Just for the listener, this was a funny thing. We were doing a series, and I think it was in 1 Corinthians, and we always fill out like sermon series titles or like just tips for the preacher on like, what are we going to preach on that week? And so I, as a joke for our preachers, said compliment and did all caps men, Tarianism.
Yeah.
And then like whoever uploaded the podcast didn't know it was a joke.
Scott Care.
And so the title of our sermon that week was Complementarianism with men in all caps. And I was like, no, that's not. Our sermon feed is not a joke.
I mean, some would say it is.
Yeah, right. But that was a good one. So today we're going to talk about complementarianism, patriarchy. Matt taught a men's advance, a couple of years ago on, what was it called?
Patriarchy.
Yeah. That's it, huh?
No, I'm not going to say the rest.
Okay, great.
We don't record those.
We don't record those for a reason. And so there's just a lot of confusion today. I mean, you look at the social contagion of transgenderism in our nation and in the world, and people are very confused about what it means to be man and woman. People are very confused about what the role of man and woman, women are, especially husband and wife. And so just thought it'd be helpful to delineate, because I've been talking about this topic. You've been talking about a lot, and we can share from our own experience or whatever. But What are some thoughts you have on this topic?
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to do, when I taught the men in our church, whatever, like I always pick a spicy title for those sorts of things, because dudes dig that stuff. Yeah. And it's called the hook, if you will. You know, I don't know if you know that, Chase.
No, I don't. Okay. You can see that from my own podcast, and how I don't have very good hooks.
It's like, today I'm interviewing Steve.
Steve on the
That's
Trinity.
the title of the podcast.
Great. So you've got
Duly
the hook.
noted, Stuart.
You've got the hook.
And so, but anyways, you know, I think with the word patriarchy, I think you have to start there.
Okay.
Because it's like, there's not much more that's spicy than saying the word patriarchy. If I just walked around Boulder yelling, patriarchy, like I would get murdered. Probably not. I'd probably just be like very angry faces and lots of screaming.
No, they'd just be like, you're another guy that's homeless. Like,
oh my gosh, this is devolving quickly. We're doing great as patriarchal leaders.
Yeah.
Here we go. But I think that term, I think we have to understand the history of it.
Okay.
Right. And to get into it, and that's what I really wanted to lead with the guys when I taught them, is understanding, and I know this is going to sound crazy for people, but the Bible is a patriarchal book. And you need to understand that. And it's not a bad word. To have a patriarchy in the family, like I refer to my father-in-law as the patriarchy of our family. And he is the head male in our family. He's the oldest. And so that gives him that title, right? And so the Bible is full of the word patriarchy, and we can see that it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And we have to start there as Christians. We have to understand that the Bible is a patriarchal book. That's going to turn some people immediately away from the Bible.
Totally.
Right? It's going to be like, no, that's bad. And I'm like, well, just hang in there a minute.
Sure.
Don't let first or second or third wave feminism like ruin all of your thinking right out of the gate. And so what you have there is this idea that you had these men who were in charge of leading. You have men who are the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel, right? You have Jesus appointing 12 men as his disciples, and it's patriarchal in its nature. I don't want to get into all of we could be here all night if we get into all that, but the Bible is a patriarchal book. And so for Christians, I think it's really important for them to come to grips with that.
Yeah, I mean, completely. The hardest thing, though, is that the landscape is so filled with caveats and nuances on that.
Yeah.
Right? We're always trying to say, well, yeah, but who went to the tomb first? And who came and told the disciples? And what about Romans 13? And what about and what about Deborah? And it's like, you could do that all day long. The norm is patriarchy in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so whether or not you like that word, the thing about that word is it's been so weaponized, and so many Christians have been kind of beat over the head with that word being some kind of bad screed against them. And it's like they tried to, in the 80s, repackage biblical fidelity as complementarianism from the Danvers Statement. This was Wayne Grudem, John Piper.
1988.
Yeah, and so they released a statement. It's pretty good. You can go read it. I would say it doesn't go far enough in some ways, but it's sufficient for certain reasons. And I think now we're seeing a lot of churches compromised. You'll get self-complementarianism, where it's like, well, the senior pastor, he has to be male, but any other pastor, female. They're always trying to give ground. Yep. And the reason is to try to please people, to show that we're not the mean words they say about us.
And patriarchy means father rule.
Yeah.
Like that's the actual meaning of the word. And I think people need to understand that. And it's really important because I think even like, it's funny because it's like, okay, you give people the definition, patriarchy, father rule. They're immediately like, rule.
Yeah, right.
It almost doesn't, like the definition almost doesn't even help itself.
I know, well, because people hate rules. People hate hierarchy.
Yeah.
In our world, they hate order, that people report to other people. We live in a very egalitarian society where everyone is supposedly equal in the sense that like we're all like, nobody should be felt to be diminished by any kind of system that's hierarchical. And so people, especially in America, hate the idea that like, no, there's order, there's hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's a very hard sell.
It's very hard. It's very difficult to sell this, And I think I think that where like when I thought of all the ways in which it's difficult to navigate, I think it usually gets boiled down to people love to take the cases of where men are bad men. And they go, see, male headship, patriarchal thought in general is bad because there's bad men. Mm. And I'm like, I understand where people are coming at from that, but I'm like, I think of a comedian that I heard one time. He's like, ladies, we think you could screw it up just as bad as the guys. It's like, it's like, sure. But it's like, if our baseline becomes on everything we do theologically as Christians, somebody messed it up, therefore it's bad. We have nothing.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. We don't even have the Bible because like the characters in the Bible are fallen besides Jesus. Yeah. Are humans.
Yeah.
And they mess up.
Yeah. Yeah. They mess up all the time. And so what I would say to that is that the idea that, hey, male headship is bad because there's bad men. Well, one, I would say this, the bad men need to be confronted. Like there should be no room for men misusing their headship role, whether that be a pastor or a father, a husband, a leader in the business place, all of those things. And so you have to look at it from that and go, no, we shouldn't tolerate sin at any level. Two, You have to look at it from the level of obedience. Is one of those things. It's like more disobedience to the Bible does not solve disobedience from men.
Right.
Right. We are to be obedient to Scripture when it calls these things, when men to be in these roles, and it's just so fascinating because it's one of those things. Like I'm very blessed. My wife loves that I get to be the head of the home, and that I'm a pastor and those sorts of things, and that's a good thing. We've had our struggles there for sure. Like it's not always been easy, but I think you have to understand that she looks at it from the perspective of like, man, the mantle's on you. You know, I've heard it said things like, yeah, it was Eve who picked the fruit, but when you see God coming down into the garden, who does he call out? He calls out the man. He says, Adam, where are you? And that's not to be ignored. That's a very real thing. He had a responsibility and he failed his responsibility, which caused sin to come into the world. And so we need to understand that men not fulfilling their duties as men is a big deal. And then if we just go, well, because some men have like not fulfilled their duties, we should just get rid of any sort of hierarchy there, then that would be a better way. And it's like, no, it's all human beings. Like we do believe in a certain level of equality, right? That all people are created in the image of God, 100%. None of us would deny that. But there's different roles that are within that. But that's also where it gets kind of murky between complementarianism and patriarchy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's like, okay, so what's the difference? You know, and I think with complementarianism, it tried to carve out, particularly in the home and the church, kind of like, well, these two spaces. Everywhere else, you know, doesn't matter. And I would say that's wrong. I would say it does matter. From military to law enforcement, I think it does matter if it's male or female, because of just biological realities. And that's where it goes back to like the social contagion, is like we're denying basic reality. And so when we try to just carve out for ourselves, like, well, this won't be too offensive, so we'll just stick to this, instead of going full orb gospel, the whole Bible, and apply it to all of life, then we're missing out on seeing the richness and the beauty of God's design for the world play out. And so, yeah, it's like the example, and now I have a daughter, is like, would you want your daughter to be drafted? If your daughter was drafted and sent to war, no. Sons may be appropriate. I still wouldn't want them to go, but, you know, it's different.
Just this military or all time, Chase?
Yeah, I don't
Explain.
know. I'm not going to go there. We're not talking pacifism and American political corruption. But yeah, I think, you know, for me, where I'm at is kind of like, if you want to use the word patriarchal, that's fine. So many of these words, like complementarian, made up. Like complementarianism is a made up word in the 1980s, and patriarchal and egalitarianism, these are 20th century disputes over theological matters. When you look at pre-1900, you know, Christianity, they didn't even like, these weren't a thing. The first woman ordained into a church in America was, I think, 1814. And I always like to say that's when transgenderism started, because what you see is the church shapes culture. And as soon as the church compromises and becomes infected and polluted in its doctrine, that plays out in the surrounding society. And so when you confuse the basic office of a pastor being a male, as it's been since, you know, Jesus had 12 disciples and the apostles and appointed other men, and it's just always been that way. When you start confusing that, it would be like me saying to Matt, well, you're the mother of your home, right? Like that's nonsense. You know, it's just nonsense. And so the same thing with the church compromising on this matter. And this is a hard thing in Boulder County, because the norm in Boulder County, the accepted norm for many Christians, is egalitarianism. And so like when we come at this stuff, people are immediately like, what's wrong with you? Or like, why are you so offensive? And it's like, we're not doing it to be offensive. It's just like what the Bible teaches, like from 1 Timothy and Titus and all across. Like you talked about Adam being the liturgical leader in the garden. Like it's always been assumed that this is the norm of God's design. Yeah.
And you see it, like the fascinating thing in all this is when push comes to shove, when reality comes into play, what we see is that even in like the kind of you could even say natural realm of things, it's like it's necessary. It's actually required. I always think of, I remember there's a woman who's a single mother, great woman. We've become friends with her in our neighborhood. she had a stalker, and she thought he was in her backyard. And she called me at like 11 o'clock at night. And she was like, can you come over and check on this for me? Happy to do it. I'm also like, call the police. I don't want to die. And so like all these things, but like I came over, checked it out for her. I was like, there's nothing back there. I know this is a scary time for you. I'm really sorry. We talked about it. And then I asked her straight up, I said, why didn't you call Ari, my wife? She's like, what do you mean? And she's a strong feminist.
Sure.
And I use that as an opportunity because that's what I do. I step on toes.
Sure.
And I said, well, I mean, you clearly believe that men and women are the exact same. You tell me about it all the time. Why'd you call me? She's like, well, you drive a truck and you have a flag in front of your house. So I figured you were safe.
What flag? What flag? Clarify for the audience. What flag do you have in front of your house?
I have the American flag.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure. In Boulder, you just don't know.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
And so, but like, I thought we had this long conversation, and it's always just stood out to me that like, when she was scared, there was like, she saw the difference between men and women.
Yeah, right.
And she did not care at all about any of that stuff. She was not calling my wife.
Yeah.
She called me. And so, I mean, that doesn't answer the stuff of patriarchal kind of conversation and these sorts of things, but it does speak to the differences that are innate between men and women in general. Of course, there's very strong women that could kick my butt, but mostly it's my daughters when they cry or they're really sad, and then they just own me. But but all that to say that there is a difference, and I think we're actually doing a disservice to our ladies. And I tell our young men, like, understanding the role that you have been given by God to fulfill is such an opportunity and an honor to do it and to do it well. And so it's like, I'll hear like some ladies say, like, well, there's some really bad men out there, and why would I submit my life to a bad man? And I'm like, man, that's a great argument to not marry a bad man.
Right. Yeah.
Like, sure.
Right.
Don't marry them.
Yeah.
Find a good man.
Right.
There's lots of good men. I can think of them in our church.
Right.
Who desire to be married, young men who would love to care for a woman.
Yep.
And I think that's a good and right thing. It's really sad to me. And I think that's where we kind of get into the separation of patriarchy and complementarianism. It's a sense of what complementarianism sought to do was soften it so it would be more palpable.
Yeah, and I don't think, to be fair to the writers, I don't think they would say it that way, but it seems to be that way.
I think that's the result.
Yeah.
As a lot of churches have used it.
Yeah.
And I think John Piper was one of the main writers in all of that, right? With the Institute for, what is it?
The book?
Yeah.
Recovering Biblical Manhood and Womanhood?
That book. And then the institute that was formed out of that was where all of that really stemmed from.
Yep.
And so I thought they're seeking to try to give the church and people a good way. I do, but I think it's been misused.
I agree.
From there.
Completely. And that's why I think we just need to get back to the Bible. Bible's patriarchal. Just, if that's a word, I'm probably not going to use that word a lot in the pulpit. If it comes up in the Bible in the text, if I need to highlight something, I'm fine using it. But I realize it's a contentious issue, but like this is a prime gospel opportunity in our county because it's so like people in the world are so inundated with feminist thinking, and feminism is not good. It's not good for women. It's not good for men. It's not good for children. It's not good for the world. And so if that's the pervasive norm in a culture that you're trying to love and share the gospel with, you have to deal with it. You can't just like avoid the biggest idols in your society. You have to confront them, especially when you have Christians that are out, doing business, going to school, all sorts of stuff, and they're constantly being fed these messages about feminism. You have to confront it, and so that's why it's something that we've always held to, mainly because of the Bible. The Bible teaches it, but also because like it's something that's in people's faces. And as we're a younger church, we have families being started, people becoming parents, all this kind of stuff. They need to be equipped on how to like have a home together, and how to operate. And for guys like me that grew up in a very like, it was complementarianism, but it was like very like soft. It was like, the best thing a man can do is lay down his power to serve his wife. And it leads to a bunch of men who think their greatest ambition in life should be to make sure their wife is happy.
Yeah.
This kind of gets into a topic of servant leadership, but like they become kind of this like, well, if I upset my wife, that means I'm doing something wrong because my job is to empower her, to make her be full of joy, and to make her life easier. And so therefore I have to do these certain things. This comes up in even our marriage, like
not our marriage.
No,
we are not married.
Good Lord.
I just want to be clear.
Wrong flag. It's like, what is the design of a man and woman in Genesis? The woman is designed to help her husband. And for most servant leadership, for most guys that have grown up in the church, it's inverted and therefore perverted. It's the man's job is to help the wife and help the wife succeed.
Yeah.
And for I think what makes me sad for a lot of marriages is that there's this isn't one, it's not talked about, but two, it just becomes a norm, and it's very hard to break that norm without some really hard conversations about like, hey, how are we relating to one another? What is my responsibility in this relationship? And biblically, it's very clear. That doesn't mean it's always easy to implement or it's not complicated in different seasons of life. It doesn't mean men shouldn't wash the dishes or change a diaper every once in a while, but it does mean like there's certain things that like men and women relate to each other in different ways. And just feminism has been such a scourge on our society. And so we got to get back to the Bible. We got to teach the Bible fully and apply it to people's lives in this way.
Yeah, totally. I was laughing because the other day, my wife and I own a business together that we run out of her home, and she was hiring some people to help her out. And a young woman was there, and she told my wife, like, one of the reasons I love working for you is because I know who runs this house. And my wife texted me, and she said that, and I feel like I just want to like text you and just say, walk out here right now and say, make me a sandwich. And I'll just do it because I want to correct this young woman.
Sure,
and she was being playful.
Yeah, right.
But that's not like, I think that's how people think about it, is that like, because like the Bible does call us lords.
Yeah.
I think we have to be real about that.
Yeah.
People are like, what would you have me use instead of servant leadership? It's like servant lordship.
Yeah.
Like that's actually a more biblical term.
Yep.
And so I think she's just trying to like playfully joke about that kind of thing. But one thing I'd love to hear you talk about, one of the things I've heard, maybe a woman who doesn't like us on Twitter at one point has said this about us, and being having patriarchal leanings as biblical Christians.
Yeah.
What she said was that the patriarchy is the same thing as slavery.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah, or it's similar. What would you say if somebody said something like that?
Gosh, I don't know, because it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. It sounds like crazy talk, but yeah, it's kind of the same argument of like the abortionist, the baby murderers will say like, well, demanding a woman have the baby is slavery. It's just it's just nonsense, because it's a covenant relationship. It's a family, and there's mutuality in the sense that like we're connected. A husband and wife are connected together covenantally. But slavery, I'm really baffled.
It's like enslaving in a sense of like, I'm Lord of the home.
Sure.
So you must do what I say.
Oh yeah. But that's not how that plays out ever. I mean, like maybe like, well, you would say like, well, this is the way we're going to do things here. And that could be kind of going back to something you said earlier, which is good, but also needs to be nuanced a bit, is like, there's a place for power to be used. I think in our world, any exercise of power is connected with abuse. Mm-hmm. And so as Christians, we can't fall for that trap. Yeah. And so a husband has power, just as a wife has power, but a husband should use his power for God's to obey the Bible, to love his wife. And so the idea that just because a husband uses his authority is somehow either abusive or enslaving or something like that, it's just wildly inconsistent scripturally and not based in reality. Patriarchal husbands are not tyrants, and if they are, they should be they should be confronted on that. And so it's just not basic reality. It's a false narrative. it's misinformation. It's like,
Yeah.
it's nonsense.
Fake news.
I have a hard time replying to stuff like that because I'm like, it's just so crazy.
I wrote down, actually, I have no idea if I wrote this down. It's just in a note that I've had forever on this topic because it's something I get. And I'm just going to read it because if somebody else did write it, which is very possible.
Yeah, copyright infringement.
Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble there. There's a whole entire thing about, stealing other people's stuff out there now. I'm not interested in that. I'm not a Harvard president. So, but it just says, a husband is required to love his wife as his own body and provide for her needs as he would his own body. That's Ephesians 5:20-29. He'll be willing to lay down his life to save his wife. Ephesians 5:25. A husband is responsible for spiritual discipline and teaching his wife. A husband is required to give his wife sexual access to his body, which most men are like, yes and amen.
Sure.
Right? 1 Corinthians 7:3-5. A husband is required to allow his wife to enjoy the fruit of her labors. Proverbs 31:31. And on top of all of that, none of these things were required in Scripture of slaves to their masters.
Right.
And so we see a very different dynamic. And I don't want to get into the whole entire slavery thing. That's a whole another podcast that we could do.
Let's
not do that here today. But when people compare it to slavery, we're like, no, it's actually very different.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's like how you treat one another and understanding these things. I think we were at the King's Domain conference last year. Michael Foster gave a great talk, or as did you, Chase. It was wonderful.
You. Appreciate that.
It was wonderful talk on nuance, since you chose to use that word earlier.
I love
winsomeness and nuance. And but I think it was very profound in the sense of he talked about how we handle certain things in situations. We're intelligent people. We need to be wise about how we go about it. And the Bible's clear that we are to treat the women in our lives as it talks about, like, basically like the fine china would be a modern interpretation of it. Mm-hmm. And he broke it down and said, like, hey, there's times when I'm getting things and I'm picking them up and I'm pick up a sack of potatoes at the grocery store. I can just throw them in the trunk of my car and they're fine. But if I go and pick up a lamp, I don't take it and just throw it in the trunk of my car. It'll break.
Right.
And so I think a lot of the critiques on patriarchy are that these men are treating everything like a sack of potatoes.
Yeah.
And that's not what the Bible's calling us to do.
No.
At all.
No.
At any level.
Yeah, and I think this can be really complicated for single guys who are dating, especially in our context, because they want to live out the biblical principles. So they want to be Bible guys, but they're scared of, alienating and causing offense. It just can be very hard. I mean, back in our day, we met our wives.
The old ways.
The old ways. And now we have apps and all this kind of stuff. And so I think that for single guys, it's an important opportunity for you to grow as a man, because I'll just be honest, like I'll just say it. I think most women are attracted to patriarchal dudes. I think there's a natural, like, God-given instinct to a guy that's going to protect and provide. There's a funny kind of TikTok, not that I'm on TikTok, that's communist propaganda, but it was a funny one. And it's this feminist that went out on a date, and she went on a date with a guy. And,
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, and she was like, he paid for me. He, like, opened the door for me, and I loved it. And it was, like, radical for her,
her mind was blown.
Her mind was blown. But I think for a lot of guys, just live out what you should be. And I think that's naturally attractive to the right women. Mm-hmm. If a woman's not attracted to that, then honestly, like, please God, like, do not entertain that relationship, especially if she's not a Christian. If she's not a Christian, you shouldn't be entertaining that relationship.
Yeah.
But secondly, like, a lot of guys are trying to compromise on this issue in order to get married so they can have sex. And that's a fatal mistake, because then they're going to get in a relationship with a feminist, and it's bad news bears from then on out. Because if they try to then 2 years in show their true colors, and then God forbid they're blessed with a child, that child now that is a important moment for a father, the first kid, and they're faced with the reality that, like, I can't nurse, I can't provide their motherly care, I can't do the things that my wife can do, I can't give birth, I'm a male, and they have to own the fact that they're a dude. And what is a dude? Am I a good man? And at that point, the marriage can be put in crisis, because the man is faced with a very existential question of, like, what is a good man? And if they've bought the feminist lie, or they've been hiding their convictions, they're either going to have to live with the lie for the rest of their life, or they're going to have some serious pain come their way.
Yeah. But for me, I mean, like, I know you've been doing this a while now, the whole entire pastor thing. And for me, it's year 18, which is wild for me to think about it. I'm starting to feel old.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only 40, but I look like freaking Santa Claus.
Yeah, you're
with
old.
my beard.
Yeah.
But like, I've seen enough cycles of things now where you start seeing trends. And a new trend that I'm seeing is a lot of men, what they're doing is they're pushing down their God-given male like strength and urge to lead and be patriarchal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a point, it's usually right around 40, where they just don't care anymore.
Sure.
They're like, I give up.
Yeah. And
they go off the deep end. They start listening to like Andrew Tate and garbage like that. Like, just for the record, garbage.
Yeah.
Right. And they start listening to that stuff and they're stuck because now they're like, I want to be this strong man. I want to lead, but they haven't ever done anything in their life to set that up.
Yeah.
And so they go hard, and a lot of them end up in divorce. And you'll see them. It's like they join a CrossFit gym, which is a cult. Just for the record,
that could be an episode.
They start. Yeah, why is CrossFit a cult? Featuring Aaron Jin.
That's funny.
But Aaron's a member of our church who loves CrossFit.
Yeah.
But what they end up doing, like you'll see him posting about, like, I'm on the carnivore diet. I'm working out every day. I'm dominating the world, and then they're divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, man, like, it's just misapplied in so many ways. And I think that's a big turnoff to a lot of the ladies, is they see that and they're like, this must be bad for us.
Sure.
Because look at these bad guys.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the thing of like, no, we just got to do better earlier. We've got to understand these things well.
Yep.
You know, and help guys out, help ladies out, see the win that's there for them. It's a huge thing. Like, I've got daughters, and, you know, like, I love watching my son take care of his sisters. You know, I tell him all the time, like, you're practicing for real life.
Mm-hmm.
How you treat them is going to be how you're going to treat ladies in your life. How you serve them, love them, care for them, guide them, protect them. And it's different. I understand there's differences there, but it's really important that even at a young age, a man learns what his role is.
I completely agree. Yeah, and I think going back to, I think I misspoke earlier when I said, God forbid they have a kid.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-natalist. We need more children, not just because it's good and God expects that,
I gotcha.
but also because of, you know, population winter that might be coming if people cease having kids like they are. But no, like, my point in saying that was like, it exacerbates the conflict in a marriage. But no, having kids is great. All people should have children. All women, particularly, should have children and birth children, because only women can do that. Don't believe the science trademark that says otherwise. Anything else on this topic that you want to add in?
No, I'd just say I think it's important that we don't let bad representation of patriarchal influence determine the whole entire landscape of it. And I think that's what we're prone to do, is just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I mean, and that's just not going to help. You know, it's less obedience to Scripture is never going to lead to more obedience.
Right.
And we have to just deal with that. And I think that's something Christians, it's a bigger topic, is if the Bible says it, are you okay with it?
Right.
And you should be. And if you're not, you need to wrestle with that. You need to talk to your pastor. If you're a member at the Well, you need to talk to us, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. And ladies, and I would just add this for the ladies specifically. I would add this: your power, if you will, is profound in the sense of it encouraging a man to become a great man. When you encourage him to lead, when you speak life into those sorts of things, a man will liven up in ways that you didn't know he could.
Yeah.
And he wants to lead you. Even I believe God has built that into the man. And so I think it's really important for ladies to understand they have a very strong and powerful role to play in this.
Yep.
And also, I would be remiss if I didn't say, we're also fighting against the fall.
Yeah.
Men in passivity and women to rebel against their husband.
Yep.
And that's just the reality of it. But it is a worthwhile fight.
Mm-hmm.
It might be the most important fight that we have going on in our world today.
Totally agree. Absolutely. Well, this was fun.
Yeah.
Patriarchy. If you're a listener, you have questions, you go to the well. We're always happy to chat about this. You know, I don't know if this is like us coming out as patriarchal or what, but if you want to call us that, it's whatever. We don't care. But we'd love to talk with you about it if you want to. So email us, subscribe to the podcast, share this with a friend. Maybe you've got a friend who's like listening to Andrew Tate and this could be helpful. Or maybe you got a friend who's a feminist and maybe this would challenge them. Just share it because it'll help spark good conversations about God, the way he made the world and the gospel and all that kind of good stuff. So thanks for tuning in and we'll see you next time.